So this is gonna be a long conversation. Yeah. Can I get in here? Maybe. Might have to get a little more friendly. There we go. All right. Wait. Totally got you. There we go. All right. Now we got it right. Just jumping in and out about that. So why don't we just do real quick introductions, because I know I've met you guys before. So you've been here. But remind me, where are you from? And tell me something cool. Something cool about you.
Start from you.
Oh, my name is Carissa. I'm starting my 5th year of PhD in computer science at UC Davis. So my projects so far have been more focused on data privacy. I'm part of the database systems lab and also like security, like in UC Davis.
Okay.
My name is Ashraf. I'm a PhD, final year PhD student.
I like it.
I'm not telling if it's 5th or 6th. This is a PhD student at the University of Delaware in computer science. My research is mostly on information retrieval. So search engine information retrieval, specifically on complex search tags.
Okay.
Okay. My name is Samira Priyanka, and I'm in my 2nd year. I'm studying at Florida International University. And my research includes multimedia data analysis, big data, deep learning, a lot of things.
So really smart people at the table. I like what, except on this end. No, that's really cool. My name is Kyle. Obviously, you guys have already met me. I'm sure you'll hear my name lots of times over the next couple of days. I'm originally from Brazil. So I've been in the US for probably about 25 years now. I've been here a while, but I still do watch quite a bit of soccer. Right? So that's a requirement.
Yes.
I sort of got into computer science off of a math and math interest, and just went to grad school because I thought, I like going to school, so why not continue this fun thing, right? And if somebody's willing to pay for it, which is a great thing about computer science, is you get an assistantship. Man, you got your tuition paid for, you got a little stipend. As long as you don't live somewhere crazy like here, you can actually pay for rent. I was actually going to do my master's, but my advisor really wanted to get people, more involved, and really wanted to get people to see the power of higher degrees, and so he convinced me to get a PhD. I think mine took 6 years. So that's, I think, a lot of average time. I've seen people that have been there for like 10 or 12, and they're just like, you know what? I keep doing stuff for my advisor, and some advisors take advantage of their students, which kind of stinks. But nonetheless, I think having a good relationship with advisors is really important. Right? They sort of make or break your life for a while, years, and that's something I really learned going to grad school. Is my advisor really went to bat for me a lot of times, even after grad school, and made a lot of connections, and stayed in contact, and was always there to help and to steer and to guide. And so having a really good relationship with your advisor, even colleagues of your advisors, is really good and really important, I think. But then I graduated. This was around the time when the economy really wasn't doing so hot, and so, or just after, I think 2010. And so professor positions weren't really available a lot, and those that were, people who had gone, let's say, to less research heavy schools and now had some experience, really wanted those. So I was like, okay, well, I guess working for industry. We'll see. Came out here for a postdoc, and then during that postdoc tried to write a couple of grants and was like, yeah, grant writing is just not gonna be for me. I'm okay with industry. And I've been in the industry since, I think this is my 5th or 6th year in the industry. Really love it. There's a lot of challenges. I think the most important thing about our type of work is to always be challenged. If you are not challenged by what you do, then you need to do something a little differently, because there's so many things that are chaotic about our work, the data, the systems, always the people. It's chaotic, but our work is really challenging in so many ways. And so if you're not being challenged, you always want to keep that in mind. You can always change data, change teams. I mean, the number of companies looking for data scientists right now is insane. It's just insane. If you've got data mining or machine learning or data science in your resume, you're going to get called and called and called and called. Email all the time. Especially if you've got a graduate degree. So I don't know if you guys have any questions about any of that, or if you're interested in some of the other questions, I can answer anything.
Yes, I was just gonna ask you. Did you start as a postdoc in industry? Is that what you're saying? Or?
Mm-hmm. I came here
Bosch.
Bosch. They're a research lab. There are several companies here, like Walmart has a research lab here. Intel. Obviously companies like Google have their own and much more involved. But there's a lot of companies whose primary business is not here, have a research lab here, because there is an enormous amount of talent here. And that talent, while very expensive, is also very productive usually, and very result-driven, success-driven. And so companies come here a lot to get sort of what they feel is the best and the brightest, to pay a lot at the potential of getting a lot back. And so I think that's the big appeal here is you're looking to hire the top of the crop, to work on things that are high risk, high result.
I also have a question.
Yeah.
You already briefly mentioned about your experience in industry and academia. I want to know which way you suggest us, because as a PhD student, we're supposed to be a data researcher, not a programmer. So
Yeah.
I don't want to be a programmer for the whole of my life.
Yeah.
I like programming, but I want to have a balance between research and programming. So
Yeah.
I want to know the difference. Many of these companies that you already mentioned, they have research center, but I want to know the difference, the way they are doing research, industry, and the academy.
Yeah.
The differences and which way you suggest.
I think that's very tailored to your personal interest, right? And to what? Sorry, there's folks wanting to get in here. If there's several, I think, things you gotta love to get in one or the other, right? Or at least be able to put up with. If you don't like teaching, it's hard to be an academia. They're teaching institutions, right? There are a number of top-level research institutions that have research positions where all you do is research, publish, and grant, right? That's all you do. But there's not a lot of those. And so if you don't like teaching, you can do research at other places. You can get funding and grants at other places. National labs is also something that you didn't mention in that mix, right? National labs, some have mostly or all security required positions, but some don't. Some have positions that you can be a foreign national, for example, right? And so I think it depends on what your interests are, but teaching is definitely a requirement. You've got to at least be able to put up with it or love it. If you don't like writing, that's also, I think, a big hurdle in academia, right? I don't know that you're going to code a ton in industry, but you are going to write a lot in academia, that's for sure. Grants, publications, you're going to read a lot, you're going to have to review a lot. And so I think one of the things that happens just sort of as a result of the setting you're in, and this happened with me, but I also see a lot with people I interview, is, you know, you'll interview or in grad school for an internship, for example. One of your questions will be, oh, hey, can I publish while I'm there? So you have this focus that publishing is sort of the end-all be-all. And you've got to write, you've got to do research, you've got to publish. And it's this endless cycle, right, of sharing your work. You get in that focus, and so you tend to think, okay, well, I don't like coding, or I don't like the things that seem to be available in industry, right? And that's not really the case. It's just that your focus ends up shifting to more academic tailored things. I think in industry, most positions don't do a ton of coding. I think there's a significant amount of meetings you're in industry because you're dealing with a business product, right? You're not gonna say, okay, whoever it is, give me a data set, I'll give you back some precision and recall, and there you go. Here's a nice, I don't know, delta improvement of 0.2% that's statistically significant. That's not it at all. They're gonna say, I have this business problem and I need somebody to solve it. My players, I keep losing them and I lose them too fast and they're too hard to acquire. Tell me how I can, help me predict who I'm gonna lose before I lose it. So I can give them something and we can keep them in the product, right? So you're having to understand business use of solutions. You're having to understand need and where your solution plugs in. And then a lot of times you might not be using the sexiest, latest algorithm because good old logistic regression with a regularizer solved the problem. That's perfectly acceptable and happens a lot. So I think those are the things you sort of have to consider. In industry, there's also different areas, right? You can go to more of a business-driven role, or you can go to more of a research-driven role, right? So Omar's work, for example, he knows a lot more about deep learning than I probably ever will. So he works in a research lab, and he's trying to develop state-of-the-art solutions for Intel, right? So he's working on the latest and greatest and sharing his research. But then he has that IP component. So he may develop something really cool, really awesome, and then not be able to share all the details because he just created something really cool and awesome for Intel. In academia, you know, like I said, you're having to deal with the teaching, with the students. You have to spend that time. If you love that kind of thing, that's great. But then you also, you know, sometimes you make half a dozen grants, none of them get accepted. Right? So there's also a roller coaster there of sending publications, grants, having to build labs, you know, having to convince people to give you money. That doesn't happen quite as much, I think, in industry. And so I think those are some of the key differences. And it ends up being what your love is. One thing I think, bar none, do an internship. Do 2 internships. And go see what it's like to be in a research lab or a company in the industry. See what they do, what they don't do. I do think that if you go academia first and you're successful in academia, it's easier to go then and switch to a research lab in industry. There's been lots of professors that have done that successfully. It's not quite the same to spend 5-7 years in industry and then try to go to academia. Because by that time, most of your colleagues have gotten tenure, or at least promotion. They have, you know, 10 times the number of publications. And so it's much, much harder to find. Yeah.
And how was your path to data science like? And then was it like, is the work that you are doing like related to what you did during your PhD, or is it like, I mean, how did it evolve like during your career?
I would say I haven't applied my PhD once in my 5 or 6 years. Not even close. What happens is, and I've seen this graph a number of times, right? It's this big bubble. And there's a tiny little speck that's like bursting out of the bubble, right? And that's your PhD. Right? So we're not in the most mature field, I know, but it's mature enough to where now the contribution you provide most of the time is a delta improvement that's delta enough for somebody to accept it and publish it and be considered, okay, right? Which means, again, it sort of goes back to what I was saying. That solution you created is maybe some really cool change of an SEM that works really well on a data set that not many people use because it's niche and interesting, and you just solve the problem that nobody really solved. But that problem might not happen much in the real world. That SVM might be really competition expensive, and again, a sort of more vanilla one works well. So it sort of depends on what your dissertation is, but by far, most of the time, what I've seen is people don't really ever work on their dissertation stuff. If you go in academia, that's different, because then you end up, in the first, I think, few years, you end up extending that dissertation and trying to get a little bit more mileage out of it. Yeah.
So wait, what was your research on?
Mine was on feature selection. So I developed a different framework in which to do feature selection, which was more class focused rather than looking at the whole problem itself. And then if you do class focused feature selection on both, I just did binary classification. You do it on both, and then do an ensemble to get better results. But again, it was really niche. And right now, I'll just do, I don't know, ANOVA or just correlation to the target, or just run, just a regression and look at the weights and all that. Any one of those is feature selection enough for a lot of stuff that I do. Is there anything that that you guys struggle with now? Advisor or a job search or conferences. What are some of the things that you guys sort of have a hard time or don't know if it might take a long time to solve? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I'm gonna go ahead. All right. So I was just right now I'm looking for jobs, right? And I'm basically trying to figure out what kind of accomplishments do you need in order to get data science positions? What do you need as background? Maybe project-wise, maybe internships, maybe specific fields.
I think as with most of my answers, it's kind of a long answer. Number one, and I think this is true for most fields, is people. It is much easier for you to get a position if you use your network. The people you meet here, you get their LinkedIn information, send in a resume. Hey, I'm looking for internships. I'm looking for full-time positions. Are you guys hiring? Right? One thing you'll find, and at least I can speak for industry. I don't know if you were interested in more in industry or academic industry. One thing that I found, or that's true for the vast majority of industry positions, is the employer that's at the company gets a referral bonus if somebody gets hired and stays there 3 or 6 months, depends on the company, but you stay there some period of time, they get a referral bonus. So it's actually in the best interest of the people at the company to, number one, refer people, but number two, if they are confident enough to refer you, they're usually confident enough to want to work with you, right? Because if they don't, then they'll just say, yeah, okay, I'll pass it along, and then they don't. So if you can leverage your network, there's added bonus on both sides. So that's one thing. And going through grad school, everybody stresses networking, right? All the time. And you never end up doing enough of it. I know I didn't. Even though I heard it all the time, I was like, I don't feel like it, or I'm just gonna go do this, I'm just gonna be on the laptop. And so it's really easy to skip that and to take the easier route, because sometimes just talking to people isn't the easiest thing in the world, you know? So it's important, I think, to keep mindful of that all the time, right? Even with people not in your field. I've been referred to positions for people who were not even close to data science. They're like, dude, there's some people here that do data stuff. They call it data stuff, right? And they're looking, they really need to hire somebody. Send me a resume. And this person was nowhere close to it. So these days when data science is so in demand, that happens everywhere. So that's one thing. Getting into premier places is hard. You know, if you want to work at Google, Google gets ridiculous number of applications. Ridiculous, right? And so if a recruiter comes to you, well, that's easy. But if you're having to go on some web portal, then you really better have something that looks great in the resume, because they're going to ignore most people. They're already getting, people from well-known institutions. I went to Auburn in Alabama. They might see Alabama and be like, I'm not hiring anybody from Alabama, PhD or not. So that can be challenging. Again, with a lot of these companies, like Google has a policy, I think Apple has a similar policy in Facebook. If somebody refers you, the recruiting team is required to contact you and set up at least a phone interview within a week or so. So they have to do that, whether or not they like your resume, because somebody there who's already there. As far as what's on your resume, internships look great, especially if you actually came up with a product. Not like a product that's sold, but whatever solution you came up with, you can say, I built this algorithm that was used for this. As much as you can, use quantifiable information on your CV or resume, right? I built an algorithm that predicted these number of predictions a day, and it had a potential impact of X dollars. It had a, performance of XYZ, and they look to use it for the next 7 or 6 months, right? I interacted with a team of 12 people. So anytime you can quantify, it gives the person who's reading it a much better idea of what you actually did and the impact it had. And industry is all about impact. They just want to make money. That's the bottom line. And so they want to know, how are you going to make money for me? It's kind of a blunt way to put it, but that's business. So quantifying things is good. Even in publications, if you can list your publications on your CV, great. List on the publication, a quick little blurb of what was the main result. One line. That's all you need. One line. Here, I devised this, I did this, and that's it. With industry, you also want to talk about tools and sort of like a knowledge base, right? So if you know Python, you know R, if you know SQL, Java, if there's certain not packages so much, but tools that are relevant to data science itself, make a little area on the side, on the bottom, in the middle, wherever, and put sort of where your proficiency is, right? Because if you just put like knowledgeable tools and you list, 8, 10 things, and Python is one of them, and I see that you just put it as a knowledgeable tool, I'm going to expect that you know Python well. And if I ask you a question in Python that I think is simple enough to answer and you can't, then I'm just going to think you're not qualified, right? It's okay to put high proficiency, low proficiency, whatever. You can look for the terminology. Always, always, always have as many people check your resume as you can. Always. And again, use your network, right? Ask your advisor, ask other people who may not be technical at all. Same resume, which I thought was perfect, I don't know, was revised by every single person that I sent it to in a different way. And they all added good feedback. So take advantage of that, sure. And I think some of these things are true for academia as well. I think academia is even harder to find a position because there's so many less positions. And so there your network is even more important. And if they get a stack of 200 applications and one, you're not coming from a prestige university, two, you may not have some of the crazy number of publications that some people have. If that's the case, your application may not get pulled from the top. And so, but if your advisor knows somebody who knows somebody, or if their advisor's advisor works there or whatever, they may be like, hey, I've got this really awesome dude. It's really perfect for your position. Pull his CV and do that. So academia is tricky that way, and there's some academics here that can speak more to it much better than I can. But I think, I don't know if that answers your question. I know I didn't specifically say, well, have this project and that project, but I think these days too, one thing that's gaining more traction than it did in the beginning is sort of like freelance type work. Not consulting, but there's so much data out there. You can literally sit at home for a year and just do data science off of public data. Oh yeah. And publish your results. You can put in IPython notebook, you can put it on the website and blogs. You can fill up an entire CV with just projects from public data. So, there's so many problems there. The government has a federal initiative on open data for federal and local entities, right? So there's data for police departments, hospitals, disease, Department of Justice, all this stuff is out there, and there's not a lot of people looking at it. But if you can come back and say, hey, I just gave a way to rank all hospitals in California in a way that helps hospitals get better. That is huge, huge, huge. You took initiative, you took data that was public, you created a solution, you targeted a business need. I mean, you don't even have to have a money-making internship to do what you would do in an internship. And so to be able to add that kind of information to your resume can be really impactful. It's just crazy sometimes when an interviewer picks up a resume and ends up asking questions that he wasn't even gonna ask. Because he's like, this thing's really interesting. Tell me more about that. I just wanna hear about that. I just think this is cool, and just ask a bunch of questions. I've glossed over all the technical questions I was gonna ask because I wanted to know about this one technical thing the candidate did, and that's mostly all we talked about. So it's like, it wasn't even a technical phone interview for me. It was more like a curiosity interview because I already thought, candidate's qualified. Everything on his resume seems like whatever I would ask, he or she would already know. And by the follow-up questions I'm gonna ask, the research or the project that they did, it'll tell me whether or not. So that kind of stuff is important. And then anything at all that you put on your resume, you have to be able to talk about. Don't put something you did 10 years ago and you can't remember. I've had stuff like that, and it's just like, this caught my attention and I'm interested in it, but now you can't tell me about it. So now I'm just disappointed.
Yeah.
Actually, I am also looking for an internship position because I'm going to my third year of PhD, and unfortunately, my advisor doesn't like to go for internship, and he's always encouraged me as a woman. It's better that you go for academia. So he has connection for both, but he never wanted me to go for. So, Anyway, how can I improve my networking? This is one of my weaknesses, I think. This is my purpose to come here or other conferences to improve my networking. I don't want to say I am a shy person, but I'm not very good at talking with people.
Yeah.
So.
So I also struggled with that a little bit. Hang on just a second here. Hey. No, no. Yes. So at close to noon, maybe right at noon, let's tell everybody, let's go to lunch and all the conversations can continue at lunch. Just do that. I'm in one of the meeting rooms. Did you see which one I was in? Did you see which meeting room I was in? Okay. Come get me just about me, and then we'll put everybody together. All right, thanks. Okay. All right, now let me answer your question. The first part is there's no easy way. It just won't come easy, or for some people it comes naturally.
For me.
Not for me either. You know, and again, I always just preferred coding or going back and doing whatever. I think a few things that helped me. One, if you find a buddy, just connect with one person. That a lot of times that leads to connecting with others, right? Getting to you have a roommate, right? Get to know your roommate. Actually get to know her well, and try to have fun. That's a big thing. I think there's a lot of focus on being serious and at these conferences and being really on point and stuff like that. Obviously, you want to go to the talks, you want to get the technical stuff, have fun. You get a little bit of break from just being in university, you get to be in a cool city, go out and enjoy yourself some. And try to get bigger groups of people together. So, where there's you and your roommate, there's maybe somebody else and their roommate, so now you've got 4. And so it's easy to make a bigger group and start branching out that way. That's a small part. I think a more significant part is understanding people better. For the most part, people like talking. They don't necessarily want to listen. They want to talk. I want to tell you about my research, and I want you to be really crazy about it, and I want you to think it is cool. That's the nature of people, So ask about people and what they do. Hey, I went to this diversity conference when I was in grad school, and it was like a math and tech diversity conference, or TAPIA. I don't know if you guys know about TAPIA. Reach or TAPIA, diversity in computing. So I went there, or before we went, there was a guy in my lab, and he's like, our advisor said, give us a list of like 30 or 40 people. He said, you have to meet these people. These are people in the field, they're really important. And it wasn't just in data science, it was just smart people who are successful and do things well, and you want to get to know them. And so he said, get to know as many of these people as you can, because these will be great connections for you. And so this particular student said, I'm going to introduce myself to every single one of these 40, every single one. And that was his mission. He went and he did that. He actually did that. And he got known around the conference as the student that was going to meet all these people, right? And with some, he might have just said, hey, I'm so-and-so, this is my advisor. He said, I really had to know you, and I just want to introduce myself. And that was it. Great, done. But he went there with that mission, right? To network, and he was going to do it, and it served him really well. And so I think you've got to think, when you come here, you have a list of a ton of publications that people have. You have a list of a ton of people that are in all sorts of committees for the conference, right? You can literally pick 20 people who you think would be really cool to meet, who you like their research, or who you think may be helpful for you in the future, or it might be nice collaborating. Pick some of those people and just say, hey, you go up to them, and this part just sucks. Just sucks because if you're shy and you're not a big fan, it's hard. It's really hard. Sometimes this is also where having a buddy helps because the two of you go, okay, it's your turn now, so you got to say that, right? But you just got to take that leap, and again, you just ask about them. Hey, I'm so and so. My research is in this, but I'm really interested in what you do. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? And then they'll go on and on and on. And at some point, they'll be like, oh yeah, what do you do? And so that's how they get started. But like I said, people want to be known. People want to be connected. People want to talk about the things that they do. And so you use that to your advantage. Because once you get them talking, it's easier to ask questions, it's easier to interact, it's easier to make a deeper connection. What do you guys have been here before. Mm-hmm. So you've been to BPDM and KDE, right? What are some of your favorite things, or what are some of the things that you think are impactful for you that made you want to come back again?
Yeah, I mean, just like networking, just meeting new people. But other than that, I guess when I came, that was when the first year of PhD, my view was different. Right now, I'm kind of closer to my graduation. That's why I felt maybe, that was I got useful advices from mentors. But right now, I just I had the same questions that they asked about job search and then things. Yeah, that's why kind of my view has changed. That's why I felt it's a bit right now from another aspect beneficial for me. I want to ask actually a question, or maybe
sure.
So about the job search thing, I had the same question that they asked, which you already kind of addressed. But then how do I know how was your job search? How do I know how many interviews is enough? How many jobs? Because the thing is I haven't yet started my job application, but I see companies contacting for interview, and I feel I'm spending so much time on these interviews or so. And on one hand, I feel each one of them is a good experience, but then sometimes I have this feeling that even the interview is going very well, when I get to the final round and I spend so much time on it, at the end, okay, sometimes it happens, I feel maybe they didn't want me at all. They just wanted to have an interview with some PhD so that they have it in their status. They could be interviewed some PhD students for this position too. The other side is sometimes even if I get the offer, then it's just difficult to decide which one is good. Then I feel maybe other friends who went the easier path, they just applied for one place and accepted. They were just having a better time rather than me spending some time and at the end just yeah, that's why. Yeah, as I said, on one hand, I feel all of them are good experiences, but then right now, I guess it's starting from last year, it happened to me that sometimes even if I get an email invite for an interview, I just feel I don't have just time for it. Let's just how many places did you apply when you were just a PhD student? And that, yeah, just how much time do you think I should spend on it?
All right. Lots of questions there.
Yeah, I have another relevant question. Maybe ask you to.
Let me try to answer some of those. Number one, nobody likes doing an interview on either side.
Okay.
So if I'm talking to you on the phone, I don't want to be talking to you on the phone. Not because you're you, but because nobody likes to spend that time asking questions that they already know the answer to. So if somebody's interviewing you, that means they want you to come work with them. They're hopeful that you're going to knock it out of the ballpark. And they're going to be a shoo-in, and that they're going to come away from the interview thinking, yeah, I should just hire her right now. Why do other interviews? She's awesome. That's the hope out of every interview. But there's been so many interviews and I'm like, oh God, I can't keep doing this. This is just, you know? So nobody is interviewing you just because. They like you, they like the resume, they want you to come with it. That's part one. Part two. It has been my experience that the majority of the time, interviews are not about technical expertise. They're about likability. Sure, if you get a cook and you know, not cook, if you get somebody who isn't in your field and you ask them what an SVM is, yeah, okay, they're probably not gonna know the answer, but the assumption is if you're at that point and you're in an interview, you're already technically savvy enough, right? How well are you gonna connect with the interviewer? Again, they don't so much care, you know, that you've coded 20,000 lines of code, or you know, they have 18 publications. They wanna know, for that 1 hour, is this gonna be a person I wanna work with, right? Do I connect well with them? Do they explain things well? Being able to explain your work and answer the questions clearly is so huge, so huge, right? I interviewed this guy that was like supremely smart, but he couldn't explain to me anything. I was like, if I get to work with you, I don't know what you're gonna be doing. I don't know how to interact with you. You know, you may be supremely smart, but I'm not supremely smart, and we need to work together. We need to, you know, we need to collaborate. So being able to communicate and connect with the interviewer, right? Asking questions that makes them think about you. So interviewing is a skill, it's an art. Just like you become proficient in coding and in modeling and a number of other technical things, interviewing is the same. You have to treat it that way. So you have to go and you have to look up all, if you Google, I don't know, top 20 interviewing tech questions or whatever, you won't find just 20, you'll find 20,000, right? Being able to answer what are some of your weaknesses in a way that makes sense, a business perspective, from a people perspective, right? You may say, well, you know, I tend not to focus on weaknesses just because I feel that's a negative way to look at it, but there's certainly areas that I can be more proficient in. This is one area I can be more proficient in, and this is what happens as a result. And by the way, I'm doing this to work, right? So spending adequate amount of time in interviewing will get you a higher likelihood of you being where you want to be. Sure, you can have somebody that, you know, interviews at some place and just takes the offer and says, okay, I'm done, I don't like interviewing, I'm just gonna go work there. Sure. Does it often happen that that's exactly where they wanted to be to begin with? Probably not. You know, because even I, having been in the industry 5, 6 years or whatever now, when I go interview for my next position, I'm gonna study before I go interview, before I start interviewing. I'll probably have some places that I'll interview just like, yeah, if I get an offer here and it's ridiculous, like ridiculously good, and I knock it out of the ballpark by accident, great. If I don't, I'm not gonna be worried, right? And so I'll start with those. Be like, okay, those are my practice ones, because like I said, it's a skill. You know, it's just like, I don't know, sport. You have to practice and you're gonna have some bad games, right? So get the bad ones out of the way. The ones you really care about, leave those until a little bit later on. When I graduated with my PhD, again, the economy wasn't doing great at that time, but it was incredibly humbling because I was applying to positions out here as well as in the Northeast, right? And in the Northeast, you have a lot of financial focused positions like quants, right? Who build things like Markov models and things that predict stock, a stock market occurrences, right? And things that need to be very efficient, very fast. And there were a number of positions that I applied to that the recruiter would even say, well, you're not really coming from what do you call it, like Yale and Harvard, Ivy League. And I get that you have a PhD, but we got these guys from Ivy League with undergrad, so we're just gonna, that's very humbling, right? Because this is an undergrad and they're saying we prefer to go with this person because we know their pedigree. And so you have to be realistic in the sense of a lot of people are looking for a certain person that looks a certain way, that acts a certain way, that has a certain background from a certain school. That's what they want, right? And they may be targeting that and looking for that, right? And they may see something particularly special on the resume and say, okay, I'm willing to interview this person because I see this thing I really like, right? And so you have to be able to capitalize on that and be able to see them not for what you're not, but for that thing that they really are keen on. So you have to be really good at communicating your research. Don't give me 10 minutes of the technical details that don't matter. Give me 2 of why this is important and why I should care, right? And by the way, I didn't do any of this when I was coming out of school, so I say that now because I've had to interview a ton of people. You know, when I was talking about my research, I'd go into all the technical details of why feature selection, that particular feature selection was useful and good and did this and did that. All I needed to say was, I developed this cool way to reduce the size of data so that it produces less noise, so that it's more predictive and gets better results. This way is a bit more complex, but it significantly improves performance, right? And I've taught no technical details, but I've told somebody in industry, what I know how to do can have a positive difference on your business. And that's the kind of thing. That 1 hour, that person may have just come from a horrible meeting and it just may not be feeling like talking to anybody, but still has to do the interview. Sometimes you're just screwed from the get-go and there's no ways to deal with it. You know, sometimes it's just like, I thought I did great, and the person's like, nah, I don't know how it is. So sometimes it's a crapshoot. Sometimes you'll make a great connection. And I've had interviews where at the end we're talking about football, and I totally messed up the technical questions. I mean, like, I thought after the interview, I was like, this dude is gonna think I'm a doofus. And lo and behold, they said, bring me on site. Make a personal connection. It's hard over the phone, I know, but make the person realize that they can have commonalities with you, right? They are gonna like working with you. And that's much more important than anything technically related. Now, if you don't know your technical stuff, okay, then you just gonna look like a doofus and they're not gonna hire you anyway, but I don't think that's gonna be the case. And then lastly, especially for positions out here, they expect you to know the basic algorithm stuff, especially. Algorithm, scalability, those types of things are, if you don't know, that's just a red flag. So that's stuff you gotta look up. I think we're about to go to lunch, so let's wrap up. But yeah, if you guys have follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer them throughout the Malaysia as well as the conference. So, you're welcome. Yes.